Have you ever noticed that when human authorities put God's word on trial, they're not really judging the Bible, they're revealing something profound about themselves? Today I want to tell you about a Finnish parliamentarian whose tweet landed her in a 6-year legal battle. This isn't just about one woman in Finland, though. This is about a pattern that we've seen throughout history, a pattern that goes all the way back to a Roman governor named Pontius Pilate. In 2019, Päivi Räsänen, a Finnish member of parliament since 1995, well, she did something that millions of Christians do every day. She quoted the Bible. Her church, the Evangelical Lutheran Church of Finland, had announced sponsorship of an LGBT pride event. And Räsänen responded by tweeting, quote, "How can the church's doctrinal foundation, the Bible, be compatible with the lifting up of shame and sin as a subject of pride," unquote. She included an image of Romans 1:27, which addresses homosexuality. On the next morning, she opened her newspaper to discover that she was under police investigation for hate speech. She hadn't been notified. The media got the information first. Now think about that for a moment. A woman who had served as Finland's Minister of the Interior, who had once overseen the very police force now investigating her, was being interrogated for 13 hours about her Christian beliefs. The charges? Well, it was agitation against a minority group under Finland's war crimes and crimes against humanity law. The potential penalty was up to 6 years in prison. But here's what makes this case particularly revealing. The prosecution didn't just go after her tweet. They reached back 15 years to a pamphlet that she'd co-authored in 2004, 7 years before Finland's current hate speech law even existed. They examined nearly 3 decades of her public life looking for evidence. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Listen carefully to what the Finnish prosecutor said during the trial. Quote, "The authors of the Bible are not indicted," unquote, "but apparently those who interpret what it says can be." We read on, quote, "You can cite the Bible, but it is Räsänen's interpretation and opinion about the Bible verses that are criminal," unquote. Her interpretation of what the Bible verses say are criminal. Do you see what just happened? The Finnish government isn't technically judging the Bible. They're judging anyone who believes what it says and acts accordingly. They've essentially said, hey, you can have a Bible on your shelf, you can even quote it, but if you believe it means what it says, and if you live by it, and especially if you say so publicly, that's criminal. This brings us to that Roman governor that I mentioned, Pontius Pilate. Do you remember the scene? It's the Jewish Passover. Jesus has been arrested and brought before Pilate. The religious leaders demand crucifixion for him. But Pilate has a problem. In John chapter 18, verse 38, we find this. Pilate asks Jesus, "What is truth?" And then he goes outside and tells the crowd, "I find no fault in him after all." Now, think about Pilate's dilemma. He's the Roman governor. He represents the most powerful empire on earth. He has the ability to condemn or release. He sits in the judgment seat, but who's really being judged in that moment? Jesus stands silent before him. He doesn't defend himself. He doesn't plead. He doesn't argue. Why? Because the trial itself is revealing something far more important than guilt or innocence under Roman law. Jesus told Pilate in John chapter 19, verse 11, "You could have no power at all against me unless it had been given you from above." Pilate thought that he was judging Jesus. But every question that Pilate asked, every hesitation, every attempt to release him, every hand-washing ceremony afterwards, all of it was revealing Pilate's own character, his moral cowardice, his willingness to sacrifice an innocent man for political convenience, his choice to listen to the mob rather than his own conscience. The judge was being judged by his own judgment. Now, this pattern repeats itself throughout history. When governments put Christians on trial for their faith, they never actually succeed in putting God or His Word on trial. Instead, they put themselves on trial. The Roman Empire tried to stamp out Christianity, but what happened? The blood of the martyrs became, as it is said, the seed of the church. And history remembers Rome not for its power, but for its eventual collapse, while the faith that it persecuted outlasted the empire itself. The Soviet Union officially declared itself atheist outlawed religion, sent believers to gulags, and tried to erase the Bible from public consciousness. What happened? The Soviet Union collapsed. The Russian Orthodox Church emerged from the ruins, and today the faith survives while the communist experiment is relegated to the ash heap of history. Nazi Germany demanded total allegiance to the state, persecuted the confessing church, and executed pastors like Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who dared to proclaim that God's law superseded Hitler's commands. What happened? The Third Reich, which was supposed to last 1,000 years, lasted 12. And we remember Bonhoeffer as a hero, while Hitler is remembered as a monster. So what does Finland's prosecution of Päivi Räsänen reveal? It reveals a government so insecure in its own ideological commitments that it cannot tolerate dissent, even from a 67-year-old grandmother quoting a 2,000-year-old text. It reveals a legal system that has abandoned objective standards of the law for subjective feelings of offense. Remember what the prosecutor said, that Räsänen's, quote, intent is irrelevant, unquote. What matters is how others interpret what she said. The threshold for hate speech isn't incitement or violence anymore. It's emotional impact. Think about the implications. If your intent doesn't matter, only how someone else feels about your words, free speech is dead. Anyone can be prosecuted for anything as long as someone somewhere claims to be offended. But here's what the prosecution can't see. By dragging this case through 3 trials over 6 years, they're not discrediting Räsänen or the Bible. They're discrediting themselves. As Räsänen said before her latest trial, quote, my case will show whether quoting the Bible can become a crime in a free country, unquote. That's the question that Finland is answering, and the answer reveals everything about Finland's commitment to freedom, not about the Bible's validity. Here's the eternal principle that we need to understand. God's word, it doesn't need our defense. It's not on trial. It can't be. Isaiah chapter 40 verse 8 says, the grass withers, the flower fades, the word of our God stands forever. Jesus said in Matthew 24 verse 35, heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will by no means pass away. The Bible has outlasted every empire, every ideology, every government that's tried to suppress it. It was here before Finland. It will be here after Finland. It was here before Rome. It outlasted Rome. It was here before the Soviet Union, Nazi Germany, Communist China, and every other regime that's attempted to eradicate it. When governments try to judge God's word, they're like a man standing at the base of Mount Everest declaring the mountain is invalid. The mountain doesn't notice, but everyone watching learns something important about that man. So what does this mean for us? Well, first, we need to recognize what's happening. When governments criminalize biblical teaching, they're not protecting minorities. They're establishing a new state religion, one that cannot tolerate any competing truth claims. Second, we need to be prepared. Räsänen's lawyer noted the chilling effect of these prosecutions. Pastors in Finland are now asking, could I be arrested for this sermon? You see, that's the goal. Not just to punish one person, but to frighten everyone else into silence. But here's the thing. The early church faced far worse than this, and they didn't respond with silence. They responded with boldness. When the authorities commanded Peter and John to stop preaching about Jesus, their answer in Acts chapter 4, verses 19 and 20 was simple. Quote, whether it is right in the sight of God to listen to you more than God, you judge. For we cannot but speak the things which we have seen and heard, unquote. Proverbs 29:25 tells us that the fear of man brings a snare, but whoever trusts in the Lord shall be safe. When Pilate sat in judgment over Jesus, he thought that he held power, but Jesus was actually revealing Pilate's powerlessness, his slavery to political pressure, to fear, to the crowd. When Finland prosecutes Päivi Räsänen for quoting Romans, they think that they're upholding hate speech laws. They're actually revealing their own insecurity, their inability to tolerate dissent, and their abandonment of true freedom. After 2 unanimous acquittals, the Finnish state appealed yet again. They're not letting go of this. And that tells you everything that you need to know. If they truly believe that they're case was strong. If they truly believed the Bible was wrong, they wouldn't need 6 years and 3 trials to prove it. The desperation reveals the verdict. When governments put the Bible on trial, the Bible doesn't lose. The governments judge themselves. As Christians, we need to remember this. We're not called to defend God's word as if it's fragile. We're called to proclaim it as if it's true, because it is. And history will remember not the courts that tried to silence it, but the truth that could not be silenced. Hey, if this video has encouraged you, please hit the like button, subscribe, and maybe share it with someone who needs to hear this message. And if you want to stay updated on cases like Räsänen's, check out Alliance Defending Freedom and the National Center for Policy. The links are in the description below. Remember, when the world puts God's word on trial, stand firm. That human judge is being judged by a higher judge. It turns out the United States or any other country's Supreme Court isn't